grade 12s, can you believe it? You're writing history tomorrow, and this is an awesome lesson just for you guys about your exam tomorrow. So you're here with me, and we have a brand new teacher here, all the way from Johannesburg herself, and it's her first show, so give her a little bit of a hands up. Oh yeah, feeling that love for Colleen. So
thank you so much, Megan, and welcome, grade 12s. Tomorrow you have a very big exam, and don't worry, there's always a second exam if you feel that you're not that ready for this one. So today we're going to be looking at paper 1, and what I feel is very important is that we look at the key questions, right? And we are focusing specifically on the supplementary exam from March. So question 1, you'll notice that at the top of every exam paper there are key questions. So question 1 is about the Cold War, and we are going to be focusing on what was the impact of the Cold War in forming the world as it was in the 1960s. So as all of you have been taught, hopefully, the focus is on the Cuban Missile Crisis. So you may know that in 1945, when the bombs were dropped on, the nuclear bombs were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, everybody was very, very devastated by what had happened to Japan. And so the fact that there was this threat, this looming monstrous threat of a nuclear war, really had the entire world in a tailspin. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the addendum. Oopsie, sorry. Let's just go back.
it's okay, guys. She's still learning the board, so don't hate.
Okay. So we've got, those are all your key questions. Megan?
Yes. I'm gonna quickly just tell you guys all about the competition that we have going here at Mindset. So all of you guys know at the next show, right, we're having our draw to win one of these Samsung prizes. So Samsung and Mindset have teamed up, powered up, and we have fantastic competition called the Learn Extra Exam Revision Marathon Competition. Now, how does it work? How do you get involved? Quick, it's simple, it's easy. I'll post on the page your notes for today, and you'll see the learning number at the bottom, which is your race number. Then I post another link on that link where you enter it. So quick, it's easy, your name goes into the draw and you could win yourself, look at this, the Galaxy Note 10, which is up for grabs for one of you special mindsetters. But before I go, I have to say shout out to Tony Trading, all the girls that work there. Elizabeth, a big shout out to you because you said I had to, so I did it for you. And I'm going to hand over. I think Colleen got the board to work.
Yes, finally got the board to work. Okay, so girls and boys, I'm sure you are very familiar with this cartoon already. Even if you just Google and you look at Cold War cartoons, you'll see that this one will come out. Okay, so the question, question 1 says, study the cartoon below and answer the questions that follow. This cartoon, we need to take note, was published in the Washington Post on the 1st of November 1962, which already tells us, and the caption says that it tells us that it was very shortly after the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay? So when we see cartoons, we need to remember not to focus on what we don't know and to try and remember everything that we do know. So even if you do not know what this man's name is, or you don't know what that is, or even if your cartoon is not your picture is not very clear, rather just focus on what you do know. And there are a few questions that you need to ask yourself. So for example, who was the creator of the source? Clearly here, the obvious answer would be that it was a cartoonist. We might not know the name of the cartoonist, and that's okay, because remember, as I said to you, we are focusing on what you do know and not what you don't know. Okay? So if it was a cartoonist, we know automatically that the audience that this particular cartoon was created for will either be biased for or against one of the characters in the cartoon. So if we do not know who these people are, the best place to always go is to the caption. Okay, already it tells us that JFK, John F. Kennedy, is on your left, my left, your left, okay, and that Nikita Khrushchev is on your right-hand side. So immediately that, don't ever ignore the caption. Whatever you do, don't ignore the caption. Right. So we do see this monstrous hand coming out. And remember what I said earlier on about the nuclear bombs that were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. If you remember that it is a monstrous hand, as obvious as what that sounds, I know it sounds really silly and maybe even a little bit petty, then you'll remember you'll remember that you should not fret over what you don't know. Okay, so it was Albert Einstein that said, if you are able to explain something very simply, then you understand it really well. And that's all we as history teachers actually expect you to do as your examiners, right? The first question says, what messages does the cartoon convey? And now I'm going to try and get a little bit technical here and use my pen. Hopefully I don't use the eraser part. And I'm going to choose green. The first clue is in the fact that they are asking you for messages, okay? Step one, when you are doing your question paper, is always to look at the key question, okay? And then when you are done doing that, you go back to your cartoon and you try and see, how can I use, you ask yourself, how can I use this as evidence to answer that particular question? How can I use this particular source as evidence to answer my key question? Okay? Then, the most important clue is in the mark allocation on your left-hand side. So you'll always notice that there are three numbers. You've got 2 times 2 equals 4. This, I'm not as interested in the 4 over here, but what I am interested in is the fact that the first number always says 2, which means that you need to come up with 2 answers. So Megan, I'm very interested to know if the viewers out there are trying to answer this question already.
I think give them 2 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll refresh, and then I'll see if we have some responses.
Okay, that would be awesome. Okay, in the meanwhile, I want you to look at the cartoon again. Okay, remember, if I take you back to the caption over here, remember that this particular cartoon was published in the Washington Post on the 1st of November 1962, shortly after the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is a major, major clue on its own. And even though we don't have Cuba or Fidel Castro in the cartoon, we know because of the date that this is indeed about the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay? So, I'm going to give the, do you think I should give the answer away? Should I take them to the memo yet?
I don't know. Do you think I should go to the next one, or you just want to answer that now? Because now.
Or do you want to give them a little bit of time to try and answer? Okay, awesome. Right? Actually, I will give this one away. I'll show you why. Because I'm very interested in this bottom point over here that says any other relevant response. So although in the memorandum, you will see that 2 answers have been given already. You'll see that there is any other relevant response. So even if you, I'm going to take it away, or try and take it away. Even you, as a learner, might not have come up with the answers that I've just shown you, but you might come up with something else that's very interesting, okay? Just as long as you remember to pair the key question with the cartoon at all times, so that you know that you are interpreting the question correctly and that you are interpreting the actual cartoon correctly as well. And Megan will just let me know if there's any answers. I'm going to move on to the next one. Okay. Oh, before I do, you'll notice that the second mark allocation, 2, so 2 times 2, that tells us the length that the answer should be. So it's very obviously then not just a 1 mark or a 1-word answer, and you should try to answer in full questions, but you're not trying to write your arm off, because you need to remember that this is only the first question and you've got so many others to answer. So the answer given to us by the memo is the possibility of a nuclear war. The cartoon shows the desperation of Kennedy and Khrushchev to stop the outbreak of the war. Another very important question to look at, to ask yourself when you're analyzing a cartoon is, does the cartoon show any bias? Perhaps there's a clue in the fact that Khrushchev has his mouth closed and Kennedy has his mouth open, which says that he is actually saying something. He's the one that's saying, let's lock this, let's get a lock on this thing, okay? So that in itself is very important, because it tells us that Kennedy was instrumental in stopping this apocalyptic event, which would have been the bombing of these nuclear missiles. Okay. Right. If we look at the next question, it says, oh, I gave it away. Explain the statement, let's get the lock for this thing in the context of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, I've already mentioned before that you need to focus on your mark allocation. So that means that they are looking for 2 questions. Very often what happens is that you guys only give 1 answer because you're in such a hurry to try and finish the paper, and then you end up throwing away your answers. So I know that nobody is really trying to answer the questions as yet. So we are going to give you a few minutes, Megan.
I think we'll answer them after the ad. I'll
Okay,
see if someone
awesome.
has posted or something like that.
Okay, yeah, so we'll do that. We'll look back at the answers, right? We'll look at the answers after the ad, but over here the key is in explain the statement, okay? And again, simply is always the best way to go about doing it. Don't try and over-explain, because if you do, you might contradict yourself, and then you end up really struggling to get back onto your original frame of thought, like I sometimes do. Okay, so once again, we're looking for 2 answers. It says, explain the statement, let's get the lock for this thing. And there's a clue in the fact that he's saying, let us put a lock on the thing, this thing. I'm going to take you back to the picture again, or rather to the cartoon. Who is he referring to? And it doesn't matter if you think it's a little bit too obvious, and that, you know, for example, one of my answers would be, let us means that Nikita Khrushchev and JFK are both now going to try and work together. Don't be afraid to mention their names again. I know that sometimes it might seem a little bit repetitive, but you need to treat each question as if it's a brand new question each and every single time. Okay? Of course, taking into account the mark allocations. Now, what some of us do is we instruct our learners to actually do this to use points, not to write the answers in point form, but to separate it with points, so that the learner is aware that, for example, if I was the learner, so that I would be aware that I'm separating the 2 points, that I've answered the one question and I'm moving on to a completely different answer, instead of repeating myself. Okay, right. Let us look a little bit now at the actual Cuban Missile Crisis. Rather at the key question. How do I get back there? Forward.
Are you ready for an ad break?
Yes,
I
almost.
think so.
Yeah, actually I'm ready for an ad break.
Okay, no problem. So guys, I see you posting on the page. I'm going to talk to Colleen about them, but we'll talk about that after the break. Cheers. And we're back, Matrix. So you know we are doing history. It's actually a first. I've never done history here at Mindset. So it was one of my favorite subjects. I know it should be one of your favorite subjects. So we're doing it here at Mindset. Revision for you guys tomorrow. And Colleen is a brand new teacher, so we welcome her with open arms here to the Mindset family. So I think she got hold of the board and the pen and everything. So we're going to take it over to Colleen.
Okay, thank you, Megan.
No problem.
I'm going to actually take you back to the key questions because somebody asked, one of the viewers asked a very important question and said, is Colleen going to do Uhuru or Tanzania?
Yeah, Theo.
Okay,
Thanks,
so
Theo.
was that Theo?
Theo.
Awesome, thank you, Theo. Excellent question. So let's quickly look at the format of the paper. You've got what in both question papers, paper 1 and paper 2. Paper 1 that you're writing tomorrow, you have a choice of only 2 questions. So you're going to choose either question 1 and question 2, or question 3 or question 4, or you'll go back up and ask question 1 and answer question 1 and question 3. It really does depend on what you've been preparing for throughout the year. Okay, so at this moment, during this segment, we are dealing with the Cold War. Okay, the exam focus, which is what was the actual impact of the Cold War in the world as it was in the 1960s. Okay, and then the next section we'll be looking at is Uhuru in Tanzania. So how was Uhuru realized in Africa in the 1960s and 1970s? And then we'll move on to the other questions. For example, what forms of civil society's protest emerged from the 1960s up to 1990? And there we know that the focus was on the civil rights movement. Okay? Even though it doesn't say that in the exam focus, that is the focus for this year's exam. And then question 4, what forms of civil society's protest emerged from the 1960s up to 1990? That's specifically in South Africa. So that there we are looking at the impact of the Black consciousness movement on South Africa. So question 3 and question 4 are very similar in the sense that they're both about civil society protest. Sorry, I almost dropped that. Ooh, let's do this. Pen, color. We're looking at both of them. We are looking at civil society protest. And when we look at civil society protest, sorry, I know it looks as if I've scratched that out. We are looking at protests from ordinary people like you or me, Megan, okay? But here we are looking at civil society's protest in the USA, and here we are looking at civil society's protest in South Africa, and this is the period that we are focusing on. Okay, so I'm going to go back, and maybe I should have started with this. So I'm going to go back to the impact of the Cold War on the world, informing the world as it was in the 1960s. Okay, so as you know, the Cold War, as you should know, the Cold War is an ideological war between the communist USSR and the capitalist USA. Okay, and they were competing to spread their spheres of influence. And there were a number of ways in which they did that. And so we are focusing, for our exam, we are focusing on how they did that in Cuba specifically. And I'm going to try and go back there. Okay, no. Okay, I'm going to go back there. I'm going to go back to the question. Again, the question was, what message does the cartoon convey? And some of you, Megan actually came up with very interesting answers that some of you posted.
Here, let me just quickly find them.
Sorry, Megan.
No, no problem at all. Andile Duba says Kennedy and Khrushchev, they were scared of war. That's the only one that
which is a good answer, but now I think, Andile, you need to also remember that the mark allocation says 2 times 2. So you actually have to come up with 2 separate answers. So you see, you're very close when you said they are afraid of war. You would have gotten that answer correct. But I think you must not also forget to focus on this whole issue of nuclear war. So without trying to go too far off topic, we need to understand that prior to this time in history, almost 20 years before this, nuclear bombs were dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And 20 years later, the world now faces the same possibility with the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, I'm told that you guys have covered the Cuban Missile Crisis in quite a lot of detail. Okay, so my focus really is going to be on getting you guys, reminding you of those skills that you need to focus on, because even if you do have a blank in the exam, like I sometimes have a blank, at the end of the day, it really is the skills that you have managed to accumulate throughout the year that's going to get you through it. Okay? So one of those skills, as I mentioned before, is recognizing the mark allocation and knowing that the first number, in this case 2, is telling us that we need 2 answers. There are other clues. So, for example, in the first question, as I showed you, it says, what messages does the cartoonist convey? Indicating that we are looking for 2 answers. Okay. Megan, are there any more answers for this particular question?
No, there's just other questions, but I'll ask you about them in the break.
Okay.
Just general. I'll have a look for you and I'll let you know.
Okay, awesome. Right. So let's look at the next question. It says, explain, and I know we've looked at it briefly before this, but explain the statement, let's get a lock on this thing in the context of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And if I take you back to the cartoon over here, you'll notice that in the actual picture, it doesn't show Fidel Castro, it doesn't show it doesn't show Cuba in any way, but it does show us Khrushchev and Kennedy sitting on what seems to be a metal box, because it's got little screws in there, and they are sitting on top of this box, and they're preventing this monster from coming out. Okay? And remember earlier on, I said to you, when you're looking at a cartoon, there are a number of questions that you need to ask yourself, and just by looking at the cartoon, even during your reading time, already you would have come across many of the questions to the answers to the questions that may follow. Okay, so if we look at the answers to this, you might be very pleasantly surprised to see that you would have guessed, or that you know some of the answers already. So the first answer says that it means that both Kennedy and Khrushchev tried to reach an agreement regarding the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay? It also means that a solution needs to include both parties. Okay? If we move on. Both Kennedy and Khrushchev were prepared to avoid a nuclear war at all costs. And then lastly, it says, once again, any other relevant response. Because you viewers and you students tomorrow might come up with a much smarter answer at the end of the day than what we could even come up with when we are trying to get all the answers together for the memorandum. Okay, now, as I mentioned before, the focus really is on skills. So I'm going to take the answers away, and I'm actually going to rub this out because I can and I know how to. Right? And when we talk about skills, we really are talking about interpreting the question correctly. And as you can see over here, the question is very, very straightforward. I said earlier on, we're going to circle messages. We're going to circle the first 2 over there, talking about the message that the cartoonist is trying to convey. In fact, when you get a cartoon, and I'm sure many of you will agree with me, those should be very easy marks. Nobody's going to ask you about, for example, the day that the cartoonist was born, or ask you about the newspaper that the cartoon was published in. Okay? We're going to ask you very simple questions about testing your knowledge and trying to see if you are able to explain what is going on in the cartoon simply back to us in a simple manner. Okay. Right. Are there any questions that we can look at?
Nope.
Because these are the only two over here.
No. I think you can carry on with the next.
Can we go? Okay. We'll do that. Right. Question 2.
Is it fine? You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Just asking.
Okay.
Just trying to help her.
Okay.
Lending hand.
Yeah. So, question 2. Again, I'm just going to take you, or try and take you back. There we go.
I've posted question 2 for you, mindsetters, on the page, just in case you're wondering.
Okay.
So hopefully they answer with us.
Yes, hopefully. Okay. Sorry, I just want to get back to the key questions again.
So guys, I'm here to tell you that we have a fantastic Samsung thing. Let me just tell you about the competition as well, while Colleen just tries and gets back to that. Samsung have sponsored us tablets and notes, the Galaxy Note 10, and in the next show, we'll be drawing that lucky mindsetter's name, and maybe it could be you. But I think we should just take an ad break, let you guys mellow in your history, and we'll be back after the ad break. Cheers, guys. Welcome back, grade 12. So I know you guys are stressing a little bit hesitant, little bit anxious, I could say, just like Colleen, because this is her first show, and we're trying to get hold of everything that she needs to do. So just chill, don't worry about it. Colleen's going to take over and learn you guys, or teach you guys, some history. So
yes, I'm going to learn you some history.
Learn you some history. It's good English here from me.
It's good English. We speak many times, many tongues. Okay. Megan was telling me during the break that there are some questions with regards to how do we answer paragraph questions, how do we answer our essay questions, and I will be getting to that because, as you know, in each section or each question is out of 75 marks, and the first 45 marks is the source-based questions, and then which includes the paragraph question, which could be anything from between 6 marks right through to 10 marks, depending on the actual exam. And then after that, we move on to our essay questions. So I will get through that, and I am aware that we still need to cover that. Okay. I am also aware that there are some questions about the Cold War still. So, Megan, somebody said something about the tensions.
Yes, I'll find that question for you now.
And then you said we would answer it during the break. Or
yeah, I can.
Okay.
Let me just find him. He says, Lawazi Nontela says, what tensions increased as an American spy plane was shot down over Cuba?
Very important question, because if you were to look at the actual memorandum, which you can download off the internet, you would see that there's sometimes this reference to the U-2 spy planes that were shot down, either over the USSR or, okay? So there was an instance of an American spy plane that was shot down over the USSR before the Cuban Missile Crisis, and then there are other incidents of spy planes being shot down. Okay, what you need to remember is that we are looking at the larger Cold War. So during the Cold War, there is always tension. There's always this threat of looming war between the Soviet Union and the USA. So any incident, including the shooting down of a spy plane, would be seen as a possible provocation of war. And that is the most important thing that you need to remember. We are focusing on the Cuban Missile Crisis in our exam, and we're not going to ask you anything outside of that scope, but you will be expected to be able to show some kind of background knowledge, okay? So obviously, when the U-2 spy plane, American spy plane, was shot down, this increased the tensions. They were more vocal in their speeches against the Soviet Union, etc. And I hope that answers your question, Wazi. Okay, I'm going to move on to, because we have already spent, we've gone over time with the Cuban Missile Crisis. So I'm going to move on to, let me just rub this out quickly, to Tanzania. And as you can see, it says question 2, how was Uhuru realized in Africa in the 1960s and 1970s? It does not mention Tanzania because, as I said earlier on, this is the exam focus. One year we might focus, or there was a year we focused on the Congo. Last year and this year we have been focusing on the African country, obviously, Tanzania. Oopsie. Wow. No, that looks a bit funny. I'm actually going to just rub that out here, Megan. Okay. So we are focusing on Tanzania. Right. What does Uhuru mean, first of all? We are trying to establish exactly how independence was realized in Africa, or what was the reality that independent states woke up to after their colonial powers left them to basically rule themselves, okay? And you will know that after World War II, there was a huge movement against for decolonization, and it became unfashionable and unpopular to still own a colony. And so very slowly from the 1950s onwards, starting with the Gold Coast, now known as Ghana, we start seeing independence in Africa. Okay, we are focusing, for this exam, we are looking at Tanzania. There we go. Right. We are focusing on Tanzania. And as almost as part of the Cold War stage, we would see that Tanzania, their leader, whose name was Nyerere, or Mwalimu, which means teacher, because he used to be a teacher before he became the leader of Tanzania, he decided to go the socialist route. Okay, so he had support from countries like the USSR and China, etc., when he decided to go the socialist path. Oopsie. Right. So I need to get to the question. Okay. Right. When we look at the source, you'll always see that there's a slight caption. In this particular case, which might be a little bit confusing, you'll see that the caption is almost part of the actual text of the source, right? So it says, this source explains the successes. Already there's a clue. The successes of Julius Nyerere's socialist policies in Tanzania during the 1960s and 1970s. So a big clue will always be, for this particular question, we may focus on the failures, we may focus on the successes, or we would ask for both the successes and the failures of Nyerere's policies. Okay? So I'm not going to read this to you, because you know that you are able to download all of the notes, and some of you may already have, or may have the March supplementary exam in front of you. But this basically talks about how Nyerere built schools, hospitals, clinics, factories, roads, railways, okay, dams, bridges, hydroelectric power plants, and other infrastructure. Okay? When we talk about infrastructure, we are talking about all of those things, like roads, bridges, etc. But putting up telephone poles and electricity lines are also part of infrastructure. Okay? We need to try and, or I would like to rather try and paint a picture of what Tanzania must have been like before Nyerere brought all of these policies about. So we know that Tanzania used to be a British colony, right? And that it was only the cities and the urban areas that were being developed with infrastructure. And it was 90% of the population actually lived in the rural areas. And it was very close to Nyerere's heart that he should look after those people, okay? They lived very far. Although they all lived in the rural areas, many of them lived very far from each other. And so that is why he wanted to push this policy of Ujamaa, okay? I've got a student named Charles that would laugh at me because he doesn't say that I pronounce the word Ujamaa properly. But through the policy of Ujamaa, which means familyhood, he literally got people, forced them to live, to basically collectivize into villages and farms, very similar to Stalin with his 5-year plans and his policy of collectivization. And through that, he was able to get people the services that they needed because people were, as it says in the source, closer together. Okay? In addition to this, people now had access to schools, clinics, clean water, and other services, right? Which already tells us that or rather Nyerere's policies were very, very positive for many Tanzanians. I would love for my learners, because I know a lot of them do want to answer this question, I would love for them to really study the source in greater detail, because it's not very often that you come across positive aspects of Nyerere's policies. Okay, so also under Nyerere, education was free, right?
I've got a question for you.
Yes.
Oh, no. Why did oh, there we go. Cynthia Kyler. How did Julius Nyerere, do you know how to say it? Nyerere's, I hope I said it right, policy of African socialism transformed Tanzania after independence?
That's actually one of the key questions, Kyla?
Cynthia,
sorry. Cynthia, that's actually one of the key questions. And in order to answer a key question like that, we actually have to look at all the other questions and once again use the sources as evidence to try and answer those questions. So you might get a broad question like that as an essay question or maybe even a paragraph question, but it's not really a question that you could answer quickly for 2 marks. Okay? And so when we do move on, I will show you how to answer questions exactly like that. I hope that helps.
I think there's quite a lot of questions, so I think we should answer them about the Cuban Missile Crisis so you guys can focus on Tanzania. So I think we're going to take a break. Guys, go get a glass of water, jump up and down, get that energy pumping, and we'll see you guys after the break.
Awesome.
And welcome back, Matric. So you're writing history tomorrow. We're going through paper 1. It's me and Colleen with you. If you have any questions, please contact us on Facebook. So you go facebook.com/learn extra, and extras with an X. And I'm on the page, I'm talking to you. I did history back in the day, so it's a little bit rusty, but I promise you I will try and help you guys out. So facebook.com/learn extra. But we have a lot to get through, so come and hand over to Colleen. She's going to fly through it and you guys will learn more. So Colleen, go.
Thank you, Megan. Yes, just to reiterate, you are most welcome to ask those questions, and they will be answered. Unfortunately, though, I can't keep going back to the Cuban Missile Crisis or to the Cold War because we've got 2 other questions besides the one we are currently busy with still to get through to. Okay, so as Cynthia asked earlier, she asked a very broad question about how Uhuru was realized in Tanzania. So as promised, I found you guys a question that says, study sources 2A and 2B. I'll have to show you 2B quickly and explain how evidence in the sources support each other regarding Nyerere's policies. Okay, so I just want to quickly draw your attention to this over here, support each other. A trick when it comes to this questions, comparative questions, questions where you have to use two sources at the same time, is to try and see if you can answer the question using the word both in the beginning of your sentence. Okay, so let's quickly look at the second source so that we can try and answer that question, right? And this shows, once again, it shows a picture. I don't know why I'm saying once again, but anyway. Okay, so it shows a photograph of university students in Tanzania, right? And the placard says, socialism is the enemy of capitalism and imperialism. So if I can just take you a few steps back and remind you about what I was saying about Tanzania before Nyerere came into power. It was a colony, and people were living in especially people living in the rural areas lived under a lot of poverty. Okay. So let's just go back to that question again, right? You've seen both of the sources. The first one was the written source that listed all of the positive things that Nyerere was able to accomplish, and then the second one was the photograph. Right, so it says, explain how the evidence in these sources support each other regarding Nyerere's socialist policies. Again, we are looking for two answers, right? And if you start the question with, or your answer with the word both, you should be able to, and use, you should be able to get the answer right. Okay, so I'm quickly going to take you to the answer, unless Megan has any answers for us.
No, I just have questions, so I think you should just answer.
Right. So source B shows the implementation of the successes of the ideology of socialism, while source C, source C shows students demonstrating in support of socialism. Okay? So that's one suggested answer. And bear in mind, I'm using the word suggested answer, because you could come up with a much smarter answer than what we could possibly. Source 2B indicates that under socialism, education was free for primary and university students, and source C shows that both students shows students demonstrating against capitalism and imperialism and wanted the implementation of socialism. Okay, you could shorten that entire answer by starting your answer with the word both. So in other words, both sources show the implementation and successes of the ideology of socialism, and both sources show did I say the popularity of the positivity of education, okay, or rather the fact that education was free and they were able to implement it and make it accessible to all. Okay, right. You just go back there. Right. Megan, I think we can go to those questions that you mentioned earlier on.
All right.
About Uhuru.
Yes, I just need to go to the comments for you. Just give me 5 seconds. Okay. Akubewe says, what was the aim of Nyerere's policy of Ujamaa? I hope I say this right.
Oh, of Ujamaa.
Excuse me, guys.
So let me just go back and explain quickly. Ujamaa wasn't the only policy that Nyerere came up with. In his Arusha declaration, he basically declared that Tanzania would follow a socialist path. Okay, and you could look up the aims of the Arusha declaration. It had, if we go back to the source over here, most of these things that Nyerere was able to achieve were part of the Arusha declaration. So things like implementing a policy of Ujamaa, things like creating better access to schools and clinics, water, and other services, making education free, but also with regards to education, ensuring that education served the needs of Tanzanians themselves. So instead of them just going to school and being taught subjects that would only benefit them in tertiary institutions like universities, they would learn more practical ways of farming, for example, and animal husbandry, etc. Things that would help them on a daily basis, things that would help them serve their community. Okay. If that's all, if there aren't any more questions,
No, there's
Megan,
a few.
I would like to move on to the third question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think do that.
Okay.
So we can get through it. More questions, and I promise you, mindsetters, we will answer these during the break.
Yes.
So don't worry.
Okay. So I'm just going to go back.
Because there's still essay questions and all that to get through. So I promise you, don't stress, don't worry. During the break, we will answer them. But don't forget to download your notes. That's www.mindset.co.za/revision. Okay. Don't forget. So everything away.
Sorry, yes. I just wanted to go back to the key questions again, right?
Okay.
So now we are going to start with question 3. What forms of civil society protest emerged from the 1960s up to 1990? And earlier on I mentioned that we are focusing on America, so the USA, okay? And here the key is to look at what we mean by civil society protest. Sorry, I keep making it seem as if I'm scratching this out, okay? So civil society protest, as I mentioned before, has to do with protest by ordinary citizens, okay? So in the USA, we have the civil rights movement, and then later on we had the Black Power movement, which became increasingly popular. So what I want to do quickly, because this paper really does focus on the civil rights movement, in other words, peaceful resistance or protest, an inclusive, a racially inclusive protest, okay? So, and then I also need to just bring your attention to the fact that we are looking at the 1960s up to 1990. Okay? Now this is very important because many of you would want to start with the birth of the civil rights movement, which was 1955 with the bus boycotts, when Rosa Parks refused to get up for a younger white man. Okay? That is definitely part of the background, but it doesn't form part of the actual question that we are busy with. So although it's okay to mention it and to know that that the civil rights movement started long before that, the focus really is on the 1960s onwards. Okay, so I'm going to move back to my addendum, right? And again, if you have a look at your addendums at home, you'll see that the source is made up of 2 parts. We have our written part over here, which I won't read to you, but I'll take you through it quickly. And then we also have this part over here, which is a newspaper clipping. Okay? Right. And you'll see that both of them are about integration and the desegregation of facilities such as schools. So in the written source, it tells us it's an eyewitness account, or rather the experiences of a young lady, Charlene Hunter Galt's experiences, okay, where she speaks about being in her university hostel and people coming up and throwing bricks through her window and feeling very afraid during this particular assault, okay? You'll see that in the caption it says that it focuses, or this particular source focuses on methods of the civil rights movement. Okay? Now this is potentially confusing because it's not showing a particular this particular source isn't really showing us how she protested what was going on, but the act of her actually coming forward and sharing her experience already is one of the methods that the civil rights activists used to go about trying to desegregate schools, or rather bring about desegregation. Okay, so, and then the next source, oh sorry, I must mention, I know this is going way, I'm making this move way too fast. Okay, it's very important to make note of the fact that this happened in 1961, and then the newspaper headline or the newspaper article is from 1965. Okay, so in the visual source, it's actually saying, it reads, and you'll see over here, they always make a point of trying to clarify it for you if it's not very clear. Okay, and it says that the headline appeared on the front page of the Southern Courier newspaper. It was published on the 4th to the 5th of September 1965. And the reason why it made headline news is because it's actually a positive story about how integration was taking place in schools. It is very important that you understand that we could be referring to, we could call it desegregation, or we could call it integration, because before this, the Jim Crow laws segregated schools and other facilities in America, very similar to apartheid in South Africa. Okay, so let's look at the questions. No, I can't get. Let's look at the questions, Megan.
Yes.
I can't get back to. Oh, there we go.
You there?
Right, there we go.
There we go. See, we just learn here on Mindset. Even if you are new, it just comes.
Oh no, this is the addendum.
Okay, well, guys, I think while Colleen just sorts herself out, we're going to take an ad break. Look at your questions. Don't go anywhere. Don't change the channel. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. Okay guys, welcome back. We're here, you have me, Megs, and our new teacher, Colleen. So we have to get to the questions because you're asking us so many of question 3 and 4's questions. So Colleen's going to race against time and try and get them all sorted for you. So Colleen, let's go.
Okay, so very quickly, I just want to remind you to look at the mark allocations on the left-hand side over there.
Oh, I think we need our pen.
I need my pen.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to try and race against time and do this quickly, right? So over there, remember, I said if it says 2 times 2, then you need to answer 2 questions. Here we're very fortunate. We only need to come up with 1 answer. The question is, why do you think Judge Bootle ordered the admission of both Hamilton and Hunter Gold into the University of Georgia? Now, just to remind you quickly of what that source actually said, 3A was about the young lady who was admitted into university that was harassed by a fellow white student, and then the second source showed a picture of integration happening relatively smoothly. Okay, so we're just going to quickly look at the answer over there. Even though you, and remember earlier on I said don't focus on what you don't know, focus on what you do know. So you might not know who Judge Bootle is, but I'm pretty certain that you know that the equality of all of us, of American citizens is guaranteed in the United States Constitution, okay? And then the other answer is University of Georgia had no right to restrict on the grounds of race. So it is actually the answers are actually very, very simple, and that's why we need you to think very simply. Again, 3.1.2, I'm going to draw your attention to the mark allocation. We are only looking for one answer. It asks you to use the source and your own knowledge to define the term desegregation, which I think is extremely important. Okay? Right? It means, you could explain it by saying that it means equal access to facilities for all races, or it could mean the end of discriminatory practices in all spheres of life. Okay? So don't fret over whether or not you were able to memorize the answer. You just need to use simple common sense and just carry on with it. And remember what I said earlier about if you're able to explain it simply, then we, your examiners, will be able to mark it simply or understand what it is that you are trying to say. Again, I want to draw your attention to the mark allocation. This particular question is asking for two separate answers. So explain how the human rights of Hamilton and Hunter Gold were violated. Very, very simple answer. I'm certain without even looking at the answers, you'd be able to say that they were verbally abused, okay? That they were physically abused. And then again, I don't want you to be too vague. If you say physically abused, say that they were beaten up or spat on, etc. Okay, so one of the answers, or you could choose any two of these answers. One of them is that they were met mainly by a white crowd who shouted abuse at them, using verbal abuse. They were racially abused, used the word nigger to refer to African Americans. Okay, Hunter Gold was intimidated. Bricks were thrown through her window. Any other relevant response? Okay, right. I'm going to, and I'm sure, Megan, I'm sure that nobody would mind if I actually skipped over this particular question, or rather, maybe I should just go through it quickly, okay? So, question 3.1.4 wants to know what were the reactions of the Ku Klux Klan, okay? And I'm sure many of you are aware, or you'll remember from grade 9, they were the scary guys with the sheets over their faces. They could have been teachers, they could have been lawyers, they could have been doctors, and they would come out at night and they would literally intimidate black activists into trying to basically stay in their place as American society demanded at the time, okay? And then young African Americans. So there again, this could have also been one question where they asked, where it could have been a 2 times 2 question, but now they've nicely separated it for you, and they've asked you basically, what do you think the reaction of these people would be? And again, if I show you the answer, it's very simple. They would have been unhappy because of desegregation. And over there, they actually would have been happy because of desegregation. Okay. So we've decided to quickly jump over to question 4 and use this as a platform to show you how to do the essay questions, okay? So question 4, as I mentioned a little bit before, is about civil society's protests, but inside of South Africa, okay? So you might get a question that has a lot to do with the impact of Steve Biko's Black Consciousness movement, okay? Or it would focus primarily on the forms of protest that actually took part in or happened in South Africa. Okay, so in the first question, or rather in the extended writing question, or rather, I'm going to first show you the source here, sorry. Okay, this source is about, or shows an eyewitness account of what happened during the Soweto uprising, and this was a journalist, and he was very afraid. He couldn't lie down because he would have been trampled by the pupils, and as soon as he stood up, he was faced with guns. Okay, and this terrifying experience is described here in the source. Okay, it's accompanied by a visual source, which actually shows the South African Defence Force with their live ammunition shooting at the students in the distance over there. Okay, so, ooh. Right, we've numbered it as question 5. Now, what I need you to take into account is that in the first extended writing question over there, you are not required to use the sources in any way. But if you choose to do the second extended writing question, so there's a choice, you'll answer one of the two essays. You'll either do 4.5.1 or you'll move on to 4.5.2, and you will see that in the second question it actually asks you to use your sources as well as your knowledge, in which case you would take all 4 sources and without tagging on them, in other words describing them, you will basically answer the question. Okay, so what I need you to look at right now is this particular question, which is 4.5.1. In the first extended writing question, you'll notice that it does not ask you to use your sources. Therefore, you have to be aware not to mention your sources in any way in the first extended writing question. This question asks how the philosophy of black consciousness influenced the students of Soweto. Okay, so I could take you through the memorandum, but we're running out of time. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to extend my page over there. Oopsie. Okay, a little bit more. Okay, and I'm going to use the screen over here to write it down for you. So you need to remember that an essay consists of a number of parts. Some people call it your introduction, other people call it your synopsis. I'm going to refer to it as your synopsis because that is what it is referred to. Oopsie. That is what it is referred to in your memorandum. And you need to basically try and do 2 things in your synopsis, which, by the way, is 1 paragraph. Okay? In your synopsis, you are trying to show that you understand the question. So you ask yourself the question, have I shown that I understand the question? Okay, now if I go back, right? If I go back to the question, right? Discuss how the philosophy of black consciousness influenced the students to bring about change in South Africa in the 1970s. A short answer to that question would be that the black consciousness movement very strongly influenced the students in Soweto and encouraged them to bring about change in the 1970s. Now I need to get back to my extended page. Ooh. So I'm going to rub that out again because it's so ugly. Okay? Right. So, in your synopsis, you need to show that you understand the question, right? And you need to introduce each and every single intro. Okay, you need to introduce each and every single topic for each paragraph that's coming. So in other words, if you have 3 topics that you want to discuss, then you need to actually list them. Okay, so you actually have to mention that you are going to be speaking about the birth of the black consciousness movement, for example, or the philosophy of the black consciousness movement, as well as the actual Soweto uprising. Okay, so just to recap quickly, in your synopsis you need to show that you understand the question, and you actually have to introduce each and every single topic for each question. Okay, so I'm going to go up quickly without showing you the synopsis, I'm going to go into the body, or rather the breakdown. So in the response, it's actually stating over here that you need to show what the role of the Black consciousness movement is, okay? And you're going to do that by dividing your paragraph into a number of paragraphs now. If I can just, into a number of paragraphs. If you look at your memorandum, you'll see there are a number of things that are mentioned. You actually need to, while you're at home, because we're really running out of time, you're actually going to have to go through the memorandum, or you can download the elaboration, and you're actually going to need to group these different things into various paragraphs. There might be 3 paragraphs, there might be 4 paragraphs, but you need to make sure that you are able to break it up into those various paragraphs, okay? And then also very importantly, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to rephrase it while you are studying. So for example, it's not good enough to simply just list in point form what you see in front of you. Point form is an absolute no-no. You need to prove that you are able to write an essay, and part of writing an essay entails writing various paragraphs. So for example, you will, instead of just writing reasons for the Black consciousness, for Black consciousness and the role of Steve Biko, you may write a paragraph describing what South Africa was like before the Black consciousness movement during the 1960s under the repression of apartheid South Africa.
Are you ready?
Okay, yes, Megan.
Already, so you're giving me 2 minutes. Oh, anyway,
Yeah.
guys, you're writing history tomorrow. It was my favorite subject. Good luck to all of you guys here at the Mindset family. We wish you well. Colleen and I, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget the draw is up next, so don't change the channel regardless. And I guess all I have to say is we wish you luck and thank you for tuning in. Cheers, guys. Have a good one.